Thank you for coming tonight to my session, Breaking Through These Brick Walls. Do we descend from free persons of color? And today, of all days, is my grandmother's birthday. That's her in the middle, and that's her to your right. But to the left, I will always give honor and homage to her because it was her one fantastic memory that she had that drove me to really being able to find my cousins and figure things out. And the lady on the left has to be her third great grandmother, but it looks like it's an aunt and not a grandmother. But I found that while researching. So, in honor of her and what we're all trying to do, find our lost ancestors. Tonight's outline. Were your ancestors the first enslaved here in America? Do you descend from free persons of color? Do you descend from white or European women? Let's take a look and see. This is a working session, as I shared. I'm going to have you actually search your DNA matches, whether it's through any of the testing platforms that you can search by last name to see, do you have any matches to those names? Now, first step, of course, we're going to do our best to find all of our ancestors on the census, right? Because it's that 1870 census when they were identifying as free people, and they took a last name where our work begins. Now, we know there's different variations of that. Some took a name because they became free and they didn't want any former names. Some were okay with the names that they took, which was their slaveholder's name. And some, and we're going to find, were probably just took their names. And there's different variations of why they may have taken a name. It's very important. There is a difference between Maryland and Alabama. So we can't assume the same occurred in both places because they didn't. I'll tell you that. In Alabama, hands down, especially where I'm researching Barber, Bullock, Macon, Pike, Montgomery, they predominantly took the name of their enslavers' last name when they became free. Unlike many other areas like Maryland, where enslaver was one name, but they had all these other names. And I'm going to try to do my best to share why that happened tonight. This is my pedigree chart. I always share this in my talks because I want people to know on the bottom is my maternal line. I have found every one of my maternal ancestors. I'm now researching nothing but enslaved ancestors. And this is where I start finding you guys. Because if you're not in my Alabama corner, which is my high matches, as we start researching these lower 13, 20 centimorgans, 8 centimorgans, fourth cousins, fifth cousins, sixth cousins, well, then that's going to go further back to slavery. And once it goes to further back in slavery, as you start researching certain surnames, those names tend to predominantly start looking for you as older cousins. And that's because you found your more recent cousins. Now you're starting to weed your way into enslavement. And that's where those surnames may reside for many of you, like they do for me. Now, have to know the boundary lines. This is a map of Alabama in 1830. And on the right side, it says Bullock in red. But in 1830, that entire boundary line was Montgomery. So if I had ancestors that were enslaved in Alabama in 1820 or 1819 or 1800, what was the land at that time? Alabama wasn't created till 1819. So I can't even find a census prior to 1820. You have to know the timelines that you're researching. Next, places we're going to be looking for the records that we're looking for our enslaved ancestors. Many of us know these, right? But I'll be honest with you. I have been researching about 25 years. I'm on 36 now. Actually, about year 33, I finally started thinking about the word deed. Deeds aren't even up here, and that's an omission of mine. But deeds are when, in Alabama particularly, they sold the slave from one person to the next. Deeds are not necessarily deeds in Maryland. They're a different way to find that recorded information. But someone shared with me about 25 years ago, you really should look at deeds. I didn't know what I was looking for. There's so much information that we're looking at and looking through that we're not going to get to it all at the same time. But this is where you're going to start looking for these recordings of our ancestors that were enslaved. Background of free persons of color. There may be other terminologies for them. I am not this expert. I'm sharing with you what I've learned, and I'm sharing with you what I feel I've uncovered about that time period and these people. They were indentured servants. Then they became chattel slavery. And then there was this thing called manumissions or certificate of freedoms. And I'm going to do my best to break down the different terminologies and what those were. So for an indentured servitude, when you were indentured servitude, a labor system where individuals worked for a period of time, usually 4 to 7 years, in exchange for passage to the New World for room and board. So we know they came to America in search of a better life, but they couldn't afford passage. So when they got here, they had to work off their debt. And so they came here as free people. At the end of their service, they were often granted freedom dues, which would include land, money, or goods. So indentured servitude was a term that I did not start learning until the fall of last year, because it wasn't a term that I ever heard of. But that's when I started paying attention, especially in this Maryland area, in that Eastern Seaboard area, where they came here the very early onset of slaves as free people. And they weren't just African, indentured servant, or Germans, or whatever nationality they were. Chattel slavery. Then that became a system where over a period of time, as slaves started to being born by these indentured servants, and we'll talk about that. And now all of a sudden they're realizing that, now we start seeing a lot of children being born, and that's not what they were expecting. So over a period of time, what they do is they change the laws to accommodate their need. And so now they were like, well, it'll be easier if they're just my slaves for life, instead of me giving them their freedom. So with every step that someone who was an indentured servant took, they then found a law to trap them, or they then did something to extend their service to them until the point of writing into law that, well, your children will be bound to me for 30 years, and eventually bound for life. And so the reasons for chattel slavery, as I found, there definitely could be more, but labor shortages, the demand for cheap labor, as we know, was all about the money. The decline of people coming over here willing to work off a debt, it started to decline. And so therefore they didn't have as much manpower. And then they started noticing these racial distinctions. European indentured service had legal paths to freedom, while Africans originally brought under varied conditions became permanently enslaved as laws changed. One thing I started paying attention to was the creation of states. As we went from 13 colonies, and as they started being admitted into statehood, the dates became prevalent to me, because many of them came over here in the 1600s, but they were not admitted into as a state, right? They were colonies, and they were trying to formulate how they were going to regulate laws and how they're going to coexist. So these dates became very important, because we can see Maryland and South Carolina and North Carolina and Pennsylvania and Delaware and Georgia. These were early onset of the 13 original states that were admitted into the Union. 1788, just after the Revolutionary War. But then after the 1800s is when we start seeing the newer states getting admitted into the Union: Ohio, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Missouri, and Arkansas, and any of the other states. It's important to understand when these states were created, because for those of us who had our family members separated and that was taken to another state, the opening up of these states, the the acquiring of land that they had, and they needed manpower. And as I'm reading, as I'm studying, I'm starting to hear they're saying, well, down in the South, they're looking to have slaves. So we can sell some of the slaves and ship them south. And so this is when that time period started occurring, where we're starting to pay a lot more attention to the selling of slaves out of state. So it's important to understand when these states started becoming into the um, union, because it started a boost of the need of slaves for those areas so they can cultivate that land and get the work done, because they weren't going to do it. Okay. So when you were born through birthright, purposely by a white woman, English woman, then, they took you to court. And it was recorded in the books, recorded in the law, that you chose to have this child. And basically, they extended your servitude, but then they bound your child to someone else. And I'm learning that binding of a child to a slaveholder and enslaver was because by right, that child was free. You were free, your child is to be free. But they weren't going to have these children just quote unquote be free. So they bound this child to a slaveholder. And generally, they would bound that child to 19 years, 20 years, 30 years. So as I'm reading and I'm seeing the word bound, I'm like, where is this bound coming from? But this is where it's coming from, because that person, whether it's a child or an older person, legally, there's a law suggesting and stating they're free, but they're trying to hold on to them through enslavement. And so as you start looking at those probate records in Maryland, I'm starting to see, oh, this one will get their freedom after 10 years, after 3 years. It's like, are you kidding me? You're about to die. Why do this person still have to work off a period of time to be free? Okay. And so this is basically just sharing how after about a month after the wedding, Maryland passed a law between that white woman, the slave, and the children. They're mixed race children from slavery if the marriage was permitted or encouraged by their master. And so this is as early as 1692, when they started noticing mulatto children are being born, or children are being born purposely by white women. And so, as it says here, who had children by slaves by selling them as servants for 7 years and binding their children to servant to the age of 21, if they were married to the slave, if they were allowed to marry. So these are the things that we have to start learning to pay attention to, right? And that's where the question was, do we know if we're actually descending from white women? Over 600 free mixed race children were born to white women by African American men during this period, colonial period in Maryland and Delaware. Fewer owned land than did their counterparts. They had closer relations with the slave population than did their counterparts in Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina. And although some claimed Native American ancestry, the evidence indicates that most are direct descendants of mixed race children of white women. Some free African Americans migrated to Delaware and Virginia, where there were more opportunities for land ownership. So imagine, think about it. We're trying to figure out, why did we get to another state? And so these are some of the things that we got to learn the backstory to be able to understand that migration that could have occurred. I bring this in because as I watched this Sally Hemings story, I hated social studies. The presidents and all of their kingsmen, I didn't care to know. I took the class, passed it, moved on with my life. But we have to learn history by doing this. And as I watch movies and I think about the narrative that they're telling in that story, I started paying attention to what was happening with Sally Hemings as I wanted to learn this Thomas Jefferson story. So this is the little overview that I found, where it basically was saying was Sally Hemings' mother was mulatto. That John Wales was her slaveholder that she had her children by. So though she was mulatto, and the story goes of who her father was by a slave woman, an identified slave woman, and the children, then Sally was mulatto. But then she got with Thomas Jefferson, of which Thomas Jefferson's wife was Wales' daughter. And that made Elizabeth, Sally, and Thomas Jefferson's daughter related. So while Thomas is choosing to have children by Sally, and all these mulatto children are occurring, these complex relationships and dynamics are happening. And we're scratching our heads trying to figure out, how am I related to these people? Without knowing these relationships, who they married, who their children are, we lose sight of the why. This is another hierarchy of Betty Hemmings, her mother, and all of her children and descendants. And little Sally, Sally Hemings over there, and Thomas Jefferson and all his children through her. What was astounding to me, that as I started, researching, I'm looking for Sally Hemings' children, there's nothing in their faces that will say to you that they are of an African-American descent. And I just look at the pictures, it's like amazing. The quote unquote, the term we hear, they're passing. But for some of them, it was very easy to do. So the farther away you left, away from your homeland, no one knew you. So let's search for matches. So I wanted to just give a very small, gentle background and to open up your minds into this conversation that we're going to talk about. Are we possibly descending from free persons of color? So our focus tonight will be Frederick, but Frederick as it relates to the place and the children in the family, where are they related to? So this is just a high overview of when I started searching for people for surnames, and I'm looking for last name matches, and I'm like, Madden, what's that name? I have a Frederick Maryland match to me with the last name of Madden, but the record is talking about Talbot. Lyles. Wouldn't have ever thought that's a name I would have thought I had matches to. Norman. So don't get to searching yet. Go. So we're going to start with the surname. So families descending from 277 white women who had 364 mixed race children are identified here. So Mary Davis of Calvert County married a slave named Domingo in 1677 and had 2 children. So Davis is a very common name, absolutely. If we search Davis in our match searches, will you find a Davis that goes all the way back to Calvert in this time period? That's how you have to think about it. Like, do they have them in their tree and it goes way, 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 way far back? Because this is a time period that we're searching for. Martha was an English servant who was married to the last name Boatswain in St. Mary's County. An unidentified English woman, oh, that frustrates me because no name means how do I find you, was the wife of a Negro in St. Mary's. But she was in the inventory of Cuthbert Scott. So when I see stuff like this, I say, okay, do I have a Scott in St. Mary's? That's reaching. Absolutely. I get that. But it says whose widow married a Baptista Carberry. Baptista Carberry. Do I have any weird Carberry surname matches? That's how my mind starts working. That goes really far back. You can only do that if you're really purposely looking for enslavement, right? Mason, Denton, Simitter. Catherine, the bottom one, Simitter, was married to a Negro in Queen Anne's County. So the reds are just me trying to highlight, some unique names of things that we might want to research when we're looking for these white women who purposely had children by Black men, by Black Negroes. Grace McDonald purposely married a Negro in Charles County. Do you have MacDonald? Shore, very unique name. Negro Greenwich was married to Jane Shore in Talbot. Mary Lyles, Mary Jack, a slave of Hugh Reginley in 1712 in Baltimore County, had 5 children. So that means I'm looking for the name Lyles. Well, she married Jack. Did Jack take her name? What name did Jack take? But those children probably took Lyles. One thing we can, well, they were married by Henderson, but I don't think that Henderson was her enslaver, or could he have been? So when we're doing researching of this type, we really want to focus, looking at one name at a time, certain identifiable locations, because when we don't do that, we have 30 browsers open at one time. And today I think I have 50. Elizabeth Proctor of Charles County had 2 children between 1705 and 1709. I know that I'm descending from Proctor. I know that Lord Crystal, definitely descending from Proctor. Beadle, very unique name. Martha Beadle of Charles County. Elizabeth Norton of Prince George's County. Margaret Madden of Talbot. Mary Wedge of Prince George's. This is that 1700 period of time. These women were free, purposely had children by slaves. So when we're trying to figure out the dynamics of our last names, and they were considered free persons of color, what were the laws saying to the children, as it shared that they would bound the children into slavery for a period of time? So freedom through manumission. So manumission was a formal process by which enslaved individuals were granted their freedom by their enslavers, either voluntarily. Some enslavers chose to free them out of the goodness of their heart. They got a conscience, religious beliefs. Eventually, I started seeing a great deal of that, especially for the Jesuit priests, especially if they were religious. In Maryland, were the Jesuit priests. Some people, just over a period of time, probably felt they got all the wealth they could out of them, or because of the service the slave gave them. Some of the slave purchased their freedom and through wills and inheritance, as it's stating here. Legal petition. I know I'm going backwards, but enslaved people could petition the court if they had agreements or a legal reason. Someone promised them they could be free, and maybe they were going to court to try to prove it. And then when slaves fought in the war, especially the American Revolutionary War, they were sometimes granted freedom. What we do know is that many times, although they were granted freedom, it was not always given. So that term bonded is where this is stating here. When you're bounding someone to another person, was legally and contractually obligated to serve someone. So it was through indentured servitude, chattel slavery, a debt, an apprenticeship. There was a great deal I started seeing apprenticeships. I saw that especially with Crystal's line, Too Good, where he was becoming someone's apprentice. Well, he's binding himself because he's free. And then after a period of time, he would be released from the legality of that contract. So these are just some of the things we want to pay attention to when we're looking, depending on the location, because a great deal of this I found is Maryland, probably Virginia. Alabama was totally different. I've never seen records like this. And I've literally transcribed an entire county, Pike County entirely, probates, deeds, wills. I probably found 5 people from a period of time of 1820 to emancipation who were actually free. So it was very rare in Alabama versus Maryland. Okay. So this is just another overview of being bounded to someone. They were sold as servants for 7-year terms, and their children were bounded to the age of 31. So depending on the date, depending on the year, they kept changing the laws. And I think as they started seeing how beneficial it was to have them bounded and not go free, that's when chattel slavery kicked in. This is the document that we're going to be talking about tonight, and this is the document that I got this from. This is totally online. And so this is from 1810. And this was just talking about those that were free during 1810. I think there's a 1790 to 1800 online record or document. It is on Ancestry. It is also on a web. And I'll put that in the chat. Do not forget tonight before we leave, download the chat, because I want you to be able to share your matches in the chat so that you could download it and then look at it later to figure out who in the group you're relating to. Free people of color in Maryland. I went through that document, particularly looking for the location of Frederick. Out of the entire list that's here, everything highlighted in red is Frederick. We're going to go over all of these names, and I'm going to start now. So don't try, you can take a screenshot, but we're going to go over all of the names one by one. Go. All right, Atlow. So what I want you to do now is go search for the name Atlow in your surname matches. These are all of the names. Everything in red, I actually have matches to. So that's what this screen is showing you. So I'm going to give you a high level, A to C. I actually have matches to everything that I saw you see here in red, either myself or my brother. Atlow. So as you go search for Atlow, I'm going to give you a background overview of what I found about the name. There was so much more with many of them. I just couldn't fit it on the PowerPoint. So if you find a match to Atlow, let's do this. Raise your hand. That way we can just see how many people have the match, if for nothing else. So Priscilla Atlow, born 1750, was a head of household in Frederick County with 7 other people in her house. So this identified her son, George. He obtained his certificate of freedom in Frederick. So anyone in the group have Atlow matches? I don't hear any chimes. Next, Banneker. So if you have Banneker matches, raise your hand. William Black. So understand what I'm saying. William Black, born 1720, married Easter Banneker in St. Paul's Parish, Baltimore. They were the ancestors of Esther, lived in Baltimore. Caleb lived in Baltimore. Charles, head of a Back River Upper 100 household. Don't know where that is. Fanny is in Annapolis. Hannah is in Baltimore. Elizabeth is in Baltimore. So most of them are Baltimore. Then we go over to James, born 1714, married Catherine Banneker. So now we have a Banneker whose last name changed to Boston. So if you have, so none of you have Banneker matches? Oh, I hope Rodney hand is being raised because he has some Banneker matches.
What location?
Oh, they're all over, honey. Did you see the screen? Baltimore, Maryland, primarily. Anne Arundel is listed, but probably for the name Boston because a female got married.
I have a lot right here for Baltimore, Maryland.
Uh-huh. To the name Banneker?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So that's
and I have one match to Banneker.
Okay. So that's a check mark for you for Banneker. So the conversation is, as you look in the tree and as you look at what they have, sometimes if it's too early, that's too soon. But if it goes back to Baltimore, or if they've been living there all this time, right, you could be connecting to someone that is Banneker. And I'm just trying to give you the backstory to the name to see if you can figure out how to make it make sense.
I've got several Bannekers on the Myers line and several others.
Okay, so
I will look at. They aren't
Kathy
really,
has some connections
really
to
close family, but further. And some have
I don't think they're
ancestors.
going to be close. Honestly, believe it. Think about it. You can put your hands down right and you spoke. But think about it. We won't have high matches unless we're still in Maryland, right? But potentially the goal is, as we're looking and we're seeing these names in those locations, now you have some direction to potentially research. There is this one woman here, Mary Welsh. Some of her children adopted the name Banneker. God, why did they do that?
Cousin Delbra.
Yes.
This is Cousin Hope. It could also be Bannaby. Some trees say Bannaby, and they're connected to the Letts.
Yes.
Yep. And they
That's
are.
for the
And they
Myers.
are. So that
Yeah.
was one of the things I showed on this screen above, where Banneker/Let. So we'll be looking at the Lets when we get to the L's, right? But that's what
Okay.
Hopi is talking about. That Banneker does connect to Lets.
Mhm.
I'm not even showing you everything. I'm just giving you a very high level overview to help you to realize where these names on your matches are coming from.
Oh, wait a
Welsh.
minute. I got one that came born in West Africa, but died in Maryland.
That's great.
That's Robert.
So that could have been through a
That's
marriage.
me too.
You too?
Yes, me too.
Okay, so y'all know how to talk and get together on the Banneker, Boston, Welsh. Got that recorded somewhere? I got about 30
I
more
have that
names to get
too.
through.
Right.
I
And
got
Crystal's Banneker.
put it in the chat. So put it in the chat. That's how come I
I
said
have Welsh.
put what you have in the chat. Perfect. In that time period, Marylandish is what we're looking for. All right, we're gonna go on to Bentley. So as you search for Bentley, my goodness, I see Mary Bentley, I'm all over the place, was a slave of William Diggs. So I have a total match to Diggs, but this stands out to me that why is Miss Bentley over there with the Diggs? So if she's with the Diggs and she's with the family that I know I'm DNA connected to or relationship I'm researching, do I need to look for Bentley? So as you go search for your matches, I'm going to read a little bit of high-level overviews. Mary Davis, born 1657, the daughter of Richard Davis of London, England, was a white woman who married a Negro man named Domingo, the slave of Joseph Tilley of Calvert County, Maryland. Mary and Domingo were living in Lord Baltimore when she wrote the details of her marriage and birth and baptism of her children and a Bible. Her daughter Rose produced a transcription of the Bible in Anne Arundel Court in August 1715. So they were the ancestors of Thomas, born 1677, on a plantation called Lions Creek in Calvert. Rose. Rose was born 1684 at the top of the hill plantations in St. Mary's.
Oh, I have a lot of those.
Rose was 31 when she brought an unsuccessful suit for her freedom against Henry Darnell in Anne Arundel.
Oh, wow.
Her granddaughter, Rosamond Bentley, petitioned the court for her freedom.
Okay.
And that's when it went on to Mary Bentley was a slave of William Diggs. So we start to see these families are interconnected, these slaveholder families, interconnected. Someone married, some daughter married someone over here. So slaves went over there and got separated. But when they started fighting for their freedom, then they were suing the person who had them currently enslaved because they don't know what the law on record was until they hired a lawyer, and that lawyer started looking at the records. As I go further down, and I'm going to move from Bentley, Rosamond Bentley, lower I see, Rosamond was the ancestor of Nancy Barton, Eleanor Nellie Cooper.
Oldest one.
I think I've seen Hassan. So that's the conversation about Bentley. So anyone else have some Bentley matches?
I have several, many, like about 10.
You have many. So yeah.
I have
So,
Bentley.
But
and
that,
remember,
the top match is out of Louisiana, born in 1735.
and some of this could have been where they sold them to Louisiana over there. It just depends, right? So we just have to, it gives us a starting place. It opens up our minds to where we can look and where the origination of these names are coming from. All right, next, Bone. How of an interesting of a name is that? Bone. Elizabeth Bone, born, say, 1740, white servant of Thomas Allender of Baltimore County, confessed to the court that she had a son named Nathan by a Negro. The court sold her son to Mary Allender, Thomas's daughter, for 20 shillings, and sold Elizabeth to her master, Mr. Bone, for 7 years. So they separated the child and mother, and the child went to Allender. Areas, St. Mary's. So then she was the mother of Nathan. David is in St. Mary's, but Sarah is in Frederick.
Let's see what we got.
Notice the separation of this family. Yes, Rodney.
Oh, I just wanted to let y'all know, and Deborah will halfway laugh. When it came to Bentley, I had a few matches for Bentley, like 100. And then when it came to Bone, I think it's spelled Bone. I just looked and I had about 50.
Exactly. Exactly. So again, right, this is a conversation that we don't know where these matches are coming from. But the further back you're looking, so we're looking at a name that originated in the 1700s. So yeah, those descendants are propagating from one century to the next, right? But we're trying to now through DNA figure this thing out. You got to know the history behind the name. You got to know the history behind the location. And we definitely got to know the interconnections of the slaves with the families and how they separated. This is a wonderful, and I should have done some underlining here of how Frederick is in play here in 1770, but the children were in separate places.
Who's the children?
So the children was Nathan. Elizabeth was the mother of Nathan, David, and Sarah.
Oh, I got a lot of bones.
The court sold her son to Mary Allender, which was Nathan was sold to Mary Allender. And then David is in St. Mary's, but Sarah is in Frederick. So next.
Deborah,
Boom. Yes.
I had to change computers. My laptop was not getting a good feed. But I do have Banneker and Diggs
Matches.
batches, right? I don't know what other names you covered. I do have those too.
Okay, put it in the chat because I want you guys to download this chat so that when you analyze who had what matches, depending on the name. So do this, write the surname and then write your name. And I think that will help us to figure out, you know what I mean? Emily Diggs, 3 matches, something like that. And that way it'll give us an opportunity to understand what your matches were. And if that's a match that I have that you have, you and I can connect. Boom.
I didn't look them up to see how many this time. I just already know I have those matches.
That's okay. That's
I'll go
okay.
back to them later on, okay?
Okay, yeah. And going forward, let's try to do that because there's a lot of names. Boom.
Okay.
Susanna Middleton, born say 1770, was a white woman who had mixed race children named Boone in Frederick County.
Oh yeah, I know.
So we know we're looking for Boone with an E without Maryland, but now we know we can hone in on Frederick, 1794. Dark mulatto man, 22 years old. And then we have Thomas Susanna. She's in Frederick. John is in Frederick. And there are so many others. I want you to realize I'll put this document in the chat again, the link to the online. There's many names. So if you have matches to these names and you analyze the family that's in these pages, you get a better sense so that as you're looking at people's trees and you're looking for a name, and maybe you can start seeing a name connected to that document. Now you can put the two of them together so that when you research your connection to that person, maybe you can find and bridge that connection. That's how I'm able to make my matches make sense. So we're looking for, again, Susan Middleton had children by the name Boone. The children took the name Boone. She still took the name Middleton.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of those cases where whoever was the slave holder, if they were free, they were probably free people of color. They were free people of color. That's what this is a document of. So she was under Middleton, but the children took their father's name. And if I'm pretty sure, strongly sure, we researched who had Boone, the Boone enslaver, maybe what was the slaves that was listed in this period of time. Maybe we could try to figure out who is the father of those children, because most likely there were current records.
Deborah,
Yes.
I put in the chat, I have a match who in her tree has these people. She has in her tree
Really?
Susanna Middleton and Negro Man Boone, who had a John Boone, who had
Really?
Paul Boone and Mary Boone Claggett, etc. So this is the match. Her name is Marilyn Murphy 751. So you might want to check and see if anybody might want to check and see if they match her.
Can you copy the link to the tree in the chat?
I put it in the chat already. Her
Wonderful.
profile is in the chat, so you can see if
Okay.
you match her. But that's who she has in her tree. She has these people you
Phenomenal. Are you matching her?
Yes, I match her.
Jesus. So let's remember, people, Carla is matching, not to say the people in the grave of the Catoctin, but she is. This is all Frederick right here. This is all Frederick. And now we have someone's tree that have all these names so that if you are matching Boone or Middleton, that maybe this is a tree that can help you bridge that gap in Frederick. Thank you so much for that, Carla. Okay. Next, Brown. Anne Arundel in Prince George's counties. Eleanor Brown, 1689, the servant of Thomas Ricketts. Notice it didn't say the slave, the servant. She is free. So she gets to be at least esteemed to another level. This research helped me to better understand, quote unquote, the house Negro. Because many of us sit back and wonder, why do you get to be cute? Why do you get to be pretty? And they have to be endured in the fields, in the dirt, and no cleanliness, or not as much as the people that enter in the house. But when we start researching these families and understanding the dynamics, something like this makes it make sense.
Okay, Deborah.
Yes.
I was just looking at Maryland and not going by those counties. So my matches are based on Maryland, period. So you want me to do it by each of the counties that you're calling?
Not necessarily. This is really about guiding us to an understanding of Maryland is cool. Definitely. This is about Maryland, right? But we know we're going to have matches in other areas.
Right.
But
Okay.
by at least doing Maryland, we know we're honing in on the connections that are almost derived out of Maryland to these names.
Right. Okay.
I missed
And
that.
so this Brown is connected to Anne Arundel, Princess George, and if you go down to where the red is, where it says Princess George, he may have been the John Brown free mulatto who bound himself to Reverend Mr. Thomas Bacon in Frederick. So now we have someone who went from Prince George up to Frederick for work. And whatever other legalities that this is saying, because this is now saying that Bacon saying that John had run away twice since binding himself as an apprentice.
My top Brown match is at 123 centimorgans.
In Maryland?
No, I didn't put a location.
Okay.
Oh, this is interesting.
Okay.
Well, maybe not. I'll see. It's somebody that I actually know how they're connected to me up under Maryland.
Oh, now see, that just pulled
He's on my grandfather's side.
some more.
The last one says Anne Brown, born, say, 1739, confessed to Prince George's that she had a 5-week-old mulatto named Eleanor. The court sold the child to Mary Edelin until the age of 31. She may have been identical to Nanny Brown, who was head of an Anne Arundel household of 7 other free people.
Oh,
And then it goes on to say she had other children. But Mary Edelin, so do you have Edelin matches? Because they're really not Edelin, they're really Brown.
Okay.
How about that?
Oh.
Okay.
So this is how we work to decipher what we're seeing. Okay, I'm gonna move on. You guys got some oohs and ohs, throw that stuff in the chat. Throw that stuff in the chat. And the chat just helps us to not talk about it, but it's good to hear you have these matches, right? Butler.
Wait, can you go back? Can you go back really quick for just 1 second? I
I
just want to take a
can.
quick shot. Give me 1 second. Sorry.
I
No
have a
worries.
question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
When we type the matches, I mean the surnames in, are we supposed to be putting Maryland or does it matter?
Do Maryland just so that it filters it more stronger,
Okay.
because we know that these people were in Maryland.
Uh-huh.
And so if anyone remains in Maryland or they have in their tree, their family was from Maryland, this will kind of help you to at least hone in on those matches. Later, you can always open it up, right?
Okay.
But we don't want Chicago when we know this is Maryland, because you won't know
Right.
how to connect them.
Right. Makes sense.
Okay. Butler. Butler is huge. Butler is definitely a big name, but Butler obtained a certificate of freedom. Well, he bought his freedom. He was about 40 years old in 1807. Complexion was yellow. Thomas, head of an Anne Arundel household, to a son named Tobias living in Frederick, and a daughter named Mary living in Frederick. But a son who was taxable living in Kent County, a son named Henry living in Princess George's County, Menahe in Washington, D.C., Nellie in D.C., and Sarah in D.C.
Walk the tree up.
So I'm trying to highlight here how this one man's family was all over Maryland.
Just slow down.
And without being able to understand their relationship to each other, mind you, there says 6 other free, 5 other free. We would have to most likely get away from 1800, somewhere around 1830, 1840. I know 1840 and 50 and 60, you see names. 40, you see a head of household. But maybe someone got married, someone's in a newspaper article, but these are just the things that guide us to be able. And then as we find people with stronger, bigger trees with better sources, now we can figure out how to bridge those connections. So, all right, I'm going to move on. This is the Butler tree. I was so happy I found this. I didn't know what to do. The Butlers fought for their freedom. Irish Nell came to Maryland as an indentured servant, married Charles, a slave in St. Mary's County in 1681, and was effectively enslaved by his master. Their children were also enslaved. This is a beautiful chart that was created that shows Irish Nell and her husband. On the left is all of their children, and then the children's outlined in color. This isn't meant for you to try to read. This is a visual indicator of those Butler names. Some stayed in Maryland. Some went to Louisiana with the 1838 sale. But until you know the big picture of the family, you won't understand how you're related. Calaman. We hear a lot about the name Calaman. Caliman, Calla. Probably there's a spelling Calloman. But the James Calaman, born 1695, Prince George's County. What is this? Negroes, one mulatto man, Robin served 7 years to serve, age 27. I think he might have went into the name Robert Pearl. There is a mulatto boy named Jimmy. Robert Pearl's sons were Thomas and James Pearl. How did we go from Calaman to Pearl? Don't matter, because they did. But the bottom line here is if you possibly are related to Calaman, you may be related to Pearl, because that's the same family. James Colmore apparently was the enslaver for Rob. He was formerly the property of James Colmore. So if you're looking for an enslaver to maybe find more records, they may be there. It says later Prince George's County deceased by Frederick County bill of sale. Someone got sold to Frederick County. Moses Calaman was the head of Frederick County, Maryland. But Moses was white. John, head of Frederick County, household, 9 other free. So this is the Calamans that we hear Donna talk a lot about, the Calamans. But then here is Mary Calaman married Benjamin Lett, son of Samuel and Jemima Banneker Lett in Frederick. I don't know why. Oh, Frederick County, Virginia, not Maryland, Virginia. Benjamin Calaman married Elizabeth Perrell in Frederick County, Maryland. These are very totally substantive names that if you're related to one, you're going to be related most likely to the others, depending on what line you're on, right? But this is where the research hits. Next, Coker. Coker family related to the Coker family of Queen Anne's County. Daniel was a head of a Caroline County, household of 11 free. An 84-year-old mulatto born in Maryland, living in Little Creek 100, Kent County, Delaware. They're all over the place. At the very bottom, another Daniel Coker, born about 1780, was the son of a white woman named Susan Coker and a slave of Frederick County, Maryland. Interesting, says he was elected but declined to be the first bishop of the African Methodist Church. He went to Liberia as a missionary and died there. Interesting. So we may wonder if we're related to Cokers. How could we be related to Liberia? Here is a little indication that can garner us to research. All right, next. Kersey. So as I'm reading, I'm seeing Talbot County, Kent County, John Coursey, head of Lewis and Rehoboth 100, Sussex County, Delaware, Dorchester County. These are within 10 years of each other. Unfortunately, the families were all over. Cecil County, Frederick County, that is in here also. Next, Crass. Margaret Crass was in Prince George's County, Crass. She was the mother of Friday, born 1746. Robinson Crusoe, head of a Frederick County household, 1800. So Crass is connected to Crusoe. These two names go together. And apparently they were in the will of John Rawlings. So when I see records like this, I look for the enslaver, I look for his death date, and I go looking to try to see if it's going to highlight family connections and ties or slave names. Crass and Crusoe go together. Cromwell. I think every name that's in red is one of my names. So I know that currently I am trying to figure this Cromwell line out. Isaac Cromwell was in Old Town of Potomac, Frederick County, Maryland. That he and Anne Green, a 45-year-old English servant, had run away. Jesus. So I strongly have found a connection to the GU 272 through the name Green and Greenleaf. And I know that Cromwell connects to Green. So this is one reason why I've highlighted Cromwell in my research story. And this is clearly saying that who was white and who was a slave. Isaac was mulatto and must have been white. And a lot of times when we see the enslaved on records, like with the 272 slaves that are identified, you don't have a husband or a wife, someone's missing. And I'm starting to pay attention to that. Someone missing was somebody white. And I strongly don't believe it's not that they did not know. I think it was because they were white and they legally had no reason to identify them. But they did do a lot of trying to circumvent the law and get away with what they wanted to get away with. So the Cromwells here were definitely in Frederick. David was in Talbot. Charles was in Anne Arundel. William was in Baltimore. Millie was in Frederick. Mary was in Frederick. And this is up and through 1819, 1820 at the most. Okay, next. D through 8. H, everything in red, I found DNA connections. So one reason why I'm doing this is because Dalton. So you guys go search for Dalton. It's because we think in our head one thing. The DNA is trying to tell us another. And we have to let the DNA drive our connections and where to look. And then once we figure out where to look, then we can figure out the names to start looking for and the things that are repeating themselves. So Henry Dalton was mulatto in Frederick County. Later, I highlighted he married Eleanor Russell, but he was bound to Samuel Pruitt. But that Pruitt has since died and that his present master, John Randall, had no other claim to him than his marrying the widow of the deceased. Oh. So he married his deceased wife. So these are some very interesting stories to dissect. But then later he was living in Prince George's County. He was taxable in Monongalia County, Virginia. So if you have Dalton, this is where you want to start thinking about where to look in your matches. Davis, very common name, but Mary Davis, born 1657, was the daughter of Richard Davis of London, England, was a white woman who married a Negro man, Domingo. So as much as names may be common, they become common if we're looking in modern day, but we're researching enslavement and ancestors. Domingo was the slave of Joseph Tilley of Calvert County. You guys can read. Rose Davis was born August 1684, was a must have been a daughter. At the top of the hill plantation in St. Mary's County. She was baptized at Natley Hall. So now we're starting to see the enslavers associated with the person that we're researching, the names that of the people who's in family ties with each other, who's doing business with each other. I see further down it says, in an apparent effort to minimize their African ancestry, Rose's witnesses testified that the family descended from Mary Davis, a white English woman, and an East Indian man, instead of a Negro man. And I think this is when she was fighting for her freedom, when she petitioned the court for her freedom. Yes, in 1781. It was amazing to me to hear people who were fighting their freedom. The judge was a slaveholder. The jury was a slaveholder. The lawyer was a slaveholder. But they still petitioned the court for their rights. It was absolutely amazing to see that. Dean. Dean's in Delaware, Kent County. Frederick County is in here. Richard Dean, born 1720, sold a black cow to Richard Smith by Frederick County, Maryland, bill of sale. So somewhere he's doing business in Frederick. But later I see Catherine was apparently the daughter of Robert Pearl. So I'm seeing connections to Dean and Pearl. Frederick and Maryland. Second-ish paragraph, she had an illegitimate child by Peter Lantern or Lantron. Very, very unique name. If you can pull matches to that name, you already know where to look. Lantron, Lantern, very unique names. Next, Devon. 1767 obtained a certificate of freedom in Frederick County. So these are two people that are in Frederick County, the name Devin. It says William Devin born, a mulatto man aged 55 years and about 5'5", born of a white woman in the family of Richard Simpson. So somewhere, whoever has matches to Devin needs to be researching Mr. Simpson for a little further backstory. And there's got to be some family members tied to those records. Gail was a servant of Susanna Cox. It'd be very interesting. I'm telling you guys, if you have these names and then you read where it says they were the servant of, go look for the court records. There's going to be so much more that's going to be in that backstory to help you figure out what more is there. So she may have been the ancestor of Captain, head of an Octorero Cecil County household, Anne Arundel, and Frederick. All three of these counties are in here. I'm doing this because it's to help you to learn to expand your research, especially when looking at these names, because this is where these families were. Graham. Here's beloved Mr. Donald Graham's family line. So he knew that Elizabeth Graham was mulatto. What's the story? Appeared in Prince George's County, Maryland. Don't know if you knew Elizabeth. Oh, Donald, you got to go way back, way back. So Graham in 1696 was in Prince George County. 1696, not 1700, not 1800. With her child, who was adjudged to be mulatto. She chose to have a mulatto child. She was ordered to serve Thomas Wells. Later, the court, in November 27, sold her and her child to Thomas Claggett. So this is where Elizabeth went from being in Prince George to Thomas Claggett. She was called the servant woman of Thomas Wells. When the court bound her 17-month-old daughter, Margaret, to Edward Marlowe, then she confessed to having another child. She was probably the mother of Catherine, Margaret, Sarah. That's the numbers that are outlined up here. And Sarah was Catherine, child of Catherine Graham, who was bound to John Claggett. She was also called a mulatto wench living in Mount Calvert Hundred on 1757. She was the servant of John Claggett of Frederick. So he petitioned the court for expenses for support of Sarah Graham's bastard mulatto child. Sarah admitted in court that the child was begot a Negro. So I think I sent this to you, Donald. I don't know if you researched it at all, but it's definitely tying the Claggett name to the Graham name and then bringing them to Frederick. Keeping in mind, they were up there in Prince George's County. So if you have matches to Graham, this helps us to try to figure out some of this stuff. And then we get with Donald to figure out what he knows and what he has. Okay, Grimes. Prince George's County. Ran away from Prince George's County to Anne Arundel with her mulatto child, Elizabeth, after the death of her master, Colonel Halliday. What I would do is look for Mr. Colonel Halliday, 1704 will, and see how many slaves he had in that will, so that it could try to possibly spell out more children, a couple of men's names, something, more details. So out of the 3 children, there was Lettuce Grahams called Negro Lettuce in Prince George's. When the court ordered her daughter Dido sold to Thomas Willett. So now we've jumped from Grahams to Willett. Listed in the inventory of Frederick County estate of Thomas Willis, 1751. So somewhere in here in between the years of 47 to 51, probably not too many extra slaves. She was freeborn, mulatto woman who claimed to be close to 40. So, moving on. There's a lot here. I'm supposed to be related to Grimes. Next, Gail. So Ann Gale, the servant of Susanna Cox of Cecil County. We've seen that name Captain. Why is Gail coming here when we saw that Captain and Ben? I don't know what's going on. I know I've seen Captain and Ben. Yes. Rodney.
Yes, all these names that you have been mentioning, from Maryland, I think I'm OD'd on them because I think I have too many of them with the surnames that you've been mentioning, including the last one that you mentioned, Grimes.
Mm-hmm.
I have at least 50 of them.
That was a lot of Grimes. So basically what I try to do when I'm doing this kind of research is I'm going to focus on one name at a time. And I'm going to do my best to research that one name at a time, looking for the largest tree, the person with the most strongest matches. Sometimes 1,000 match tree may not be as good as a 23 people tree, because that 23 people tree, what looks weird, can literally take you a little far back more than we may realize. So don't discredit a too small of a tree. Anything 15 and up, I will peek at. And then when I'm desperate, I look under 15. But you take one name at a time. And then what you're doing with that one name at a time is you're looking for the highest match, the tree, and then you want to look in the tree to where are they living, what are the names in that tree, but you have to have this story with you, printed in front of you on your screen, so then you can try to see if it could possibly line up. And then you look at your tree. Then you look at your story. Are your people in that area? Again, it's difficult trying to research enslavement if you don't have your people strengthened at least through 1870 and you step your way. Notice the dates I'm talking about. I'm talking about 1800, 1700. When we fill in our 5 generations on the tree, we're really just trying to find our 1870 ancestors. That sometimes can take us to 1800. Depending on their ages, my ancestors at 5 generations in the tree, starting with myself, goes to 1800. I never ever thought, I don't know how long it would take me to start looking at 1700 research matches, 1600 research matches. But here we are. So, but you have to strengthen your tree by finding up to that 5 generations to be able to figure out where there's lining in your line. Sometimes when you look at people's tree, you can start seeing how they're married, right? How the daughter's married and then someone else married. And then somewhere you might see someone who pops in a name that is in your tree. That's what you're looking for. Does someone have a name in their tree that looks similar to names you are familiar with in an area you're familiar with? Hill. I definitely have matches to Hills. This is just telling you Anne Arundel, Prince George's, and this should have been in Frederick. Lower down, it says Anthony, head of a Frederick County household. So the reason I'm doing this, right, is because when I first came to Frederick, everything was all things Frederick County. I'm like, Frederick started from somewhere. Frederick is not alone here. They didn't just poof, I'm in Frederick County, Maryland. No, I kept saying they came from somewhere. And this is helping us to understand that those people in Frederick have backstories that go further south. And here I'm reading, which is a name I'm researching currently. The husband of Elizabeth Hill, called Eliza, daughter-in-law of Anthony Hill. That's not what I wanted to find. I saw the name Darnell somewhere. Oh, up higher. John Darnell sued him for 3,220 pounds of tobacco because he failed to prosecute and had to pay Anthony's costs. But you start paying attention to names. Darnell is an enslaver, big enslaver in that area. Donald connects to Claggett. Donald connects to Diggs, Carroll. All these families intermarried into each other. So that's one reason why I'm looking at all of these families together, because their daughters married into the other and the sons married into the other. So they, without a doubt, was going to keep those slaves within that family. But when they sued for their freedom, they became free. But then they had to work. So they bound themselves to someone. So that's where the apprenticeships are coming into play. The bounding themselves and the records are coming into play. Hilton. So somewhere it's highlighting he sued Robert Butcher, administrator of Robert Butcher in Kent County, Maryland. At the top it says, was apparently identical to Coffee. Coffee Hilton, born 1699, was apparently identical to Coffee, who was manumitted with his wife Sue by Evan Jones. Okay, it's just saying that he is the same person who became manumitted with his wife Sue. So as you're researching, when we're talking about Frederick, Maryland, most times we're trying to figure out the enslavement, right? So sometimes you can just tuck this as in your head as when I'm ready, I'll go there. There was a lot of information that I had gotten over the years I was not ready for. But when I became ready, I became hot on fire. So most of the things, everything I share is going to be about enslavement. But I am trying to help posture and give you something that's going to help you to take your research further when you're ready. But what I'm trying to help you to be able to see that some of your matches are there because they are your 4th to 6th generation, 4th cousin to 6th cousin matches. And a 4th cousin match is 6 generations. Literally. So that means after that 5 generations is full, you need to look at that next person. So if you have a lot of gaps in your tree, it's going to be difficult to connect these dots with that. So do the work to connect to your 5th generation tree. And then when you're ready, you can start paying attention to this information, especially when you see the tree. So it was really cool. Carla shared that person who had every name, that person probably already did the work. They already looked at this record and found every person and put them in their tree because they're related to someone. So it's wonderful that online and this kind of thing, the work is already done. I'm trying to find that work that's done. MP is actually, it says MP was in a case with which Savoy was convicted of stealing. Because they're free, we start seeing different things like that. But it says Sarah MP had 2 illegitimate mulatto children by Mark Williams. So that means you can have DNA matches to Williams and MP. Her parents and him, but he's going to be tied to the enslaver. So you're going to look for the enslaver of Mark Williams in Anne Arundel in the year 1717 to 1719. Figure out when he died and look for them slaves in his record. That's what I would do. And how I try to find the slaves associated with that family. And then we know in the census, it may say mulatto, later on as we get closer to 1870, but. And then here, Peter, she had a child named Peter. Peter was born. He married Phyllis Emerson, a Negro servant. She was a servant. She was free. So now you have Emerson to research and MP to research. And the 2 of those names, if you get Emersons and MPs possibly in your trees, now you're seeing where that connection may be coming from. And depending on what DNA cousin they are, if they're 4th cousin, 5th cousin, even better. You go to that grandparent person and now you're trying to figure out, because this is how we are related right here. Okay, that's MP. Johnson. We already know the Johnsons. I've been beating them up ever since y'all met me. But the Johnsons originated in Northampton County, Virginia, before 1650. And this is free people named Johnson. So Anthony Johnson was a Negro born 1600 when he purchased a calf from James Berry, and it just goes on and on. I have DNA matches to Johnson and Frederick, trying to figure out, is it the same white Frederick? Because I have both black and white. And the white goes to my father's side, which rears out of Jamaica and England. So I already know where that line is hitting from. And the black side, I know where the family comes. I just don't know if they're connected to the other Johnsons or whatever. But this helps us to figure these things out. So this is Johnson related to Dorchester, Kent, Talbot. I'm just trying to pull out some of the counties. Accomack is in here as well.
Delbra,
Yes.
point of information. Are you hinting at a possible Maryland, Virginia connection between the Johnsons?
Am I hinting at a connection between Maryland and Virginia?
Yeah, because according to what I know, Anthony Johnson, the one that was born in 1600, he came over as a slave, but then his master did something very incredible for him. He actually helped him to purchase his home. But when Anthony Johnson died, the home that he had was turned into a plantation. So I was wondering, you mentioned the Johnsons, of course, and Frederick. I'm going to try to do some research and find out that the Johnsons and Frederick had any relationship with the Johnsons in Virginia, because that might link those two people that you were curious about. That might be a linkage between the two of them.
Well, I know that many of the Johnsons came to Maryland. I have not seen them coming to Virginia, but again, these families migrated from somewhere and they landed where they could buy land, right? And so it's about, but because it can go so far back in from where the land where they migrated from, that it becomes difficult trying to link those families.
And I'm also going to do a DNA match by myself with Bradbury, because that was the name of the slave owner who owned Anthony Johnson.
Okay. And that's absolutely, and that's awesome, because at the end of the day, this is alluding something about him and the land. He went to court and the wife had to step in. So I'm reading in there what you're mentioning, but definitely this is about how can we break down these stories to make them make sense. So I can't allude that there is a connection because I haven't really strongly looked at it, but I'm going to go on to Jones because I see the servant of Jonas Toogood. And we know that Toogood is belongs to our good girl over here. So for Toogood was convicted for having an illegitimate mulatto child. So I search for Jones. I have Jones. I know that I don't have Toogood, but this is about just trying to see if you have these matches. Down here it says, testify that John Jones lived for a time in Prince George's County and had a brother-in-law named John Lee. So now this is tying, John Jones had a sister. Sister married someone named Lee. Okay. Family in Anne Arundel. I don't want to. Frederick County. Cassie, head of a Frederick household of 4, other free. The mother of Daniel Jones, who obtained a certificate of freedom in Frederick County on 1820. So if you're looking at Joneses in Frederick, especially in 1800s or so, If they're recorded in the census, they were free. Then this is trying to help give a breakdown overview of that family. They were also in Montgomery, but a couple more of them in Frederick. So the Jones surname. King. And one thing about researching the names, like you're saying, Rodney, you research the things that stand out to you and that make sense and that pulls you. Absolutely. You know, right now I'm being pulled by a couple of the different names while I'm trying to do this, but while I'm working on mine, I'm thinking about how can this help others. So that's why I do these sessions. So King, born in Prince County, Georgia. Toward the bottom, there's a Prince William County, Virginia. Mary may have also been the ancestor of members of the King family who lived in Prince William County, Virginia. Also in Frederick, also in Talbot. So if you have King matches, and this is a conversation about white women having children with slaves and us being free persons of color because of that birthright. But then the law, and this is the ones who got to say they were free, regardless of the legally that was associated with it. There were many who didn't win. Knight is a name in Frederick. Knight is all over Frederick. So this is definitely a surname in Frederick County. The servant of Robert Eagle in Anne Arundel. She had a child with a Negro belonging to Charles Greenberry. She may have been the ancestor of Moses. And Moses was in Frederick. That's Knight. Lee. So we saw Lee earlier, associated with another name. She was a servant of Lyle Welch. Lucy Lee in Montgomery County. And down here is Dorchester County. So if you're related to Lee's, possible matches in Frederick, look for matches in Dorchester County also. And Prince George's. Here's that infamous name, Let. We learned earlier, Lets are connected to Banneker's. And I thought I read earlier that Let was also connected to Calamans, with a different spelling variation. So there we go. So when these families married into each other, that's why you want to be paying attention to how you're related. And this is definitely Frederick. Washington County is in here. Hold on. The last line says, the last line says, Zachariah, a free black taxable in Shenandoah County, 1801 to 1813. Samuel born, 1788, a mulatto, head of a Defiance County, Ohio household with property, $1,200 in real estate in 1860.
Wait. Delbra.
Yes.
OMG.
OMG. Yes.
Okay. So my grand aunt, her name was Emma Warren. Emma Warren married a Frank Lett. And I haven't been able to trace his line back, but someone in my family said, hey, you know that we're related to a Benjamin. I said, okay, Benjamin who? They said, you know, the person who designed the streets of the Capitol. I said, wait a minute, are you talking about Benjamin Banneker? They say yes. So when you brought up the surname Lett, I did a search. Lord have mercy, do I have a lot of Letts in my DNA? So you said that the Letts are tied in with the Bannekers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cousins, I won't have to be online when y'all hear me scream, hallelujah.
Rodney.
This is
When
this
I
Rodney?
when I pieced together the trail between me and this Benjamin Banneker, because
Rod,
everybody gonna hear me.
You're going to hear me too. I'll be with you.
Rodney.
Who
A
say
lot of
Rodney?
matches
Emily
here.
Rodney.
A lot of matches here.
There's a
Wait a
new
minute, wait a
book.
minute, wait a minute.
There's a new book
Who
out
is
on the Bannekers, Rodney. I'll send you the name of that. I'll copy it. Send you the name on the book, okay?
and who is talking to me?
Emily.
Emily.
Oh, Emily. Okay, because all I heard a lot of voices that I heard Rodney, Rodney,
Right.
Rodney.
Yeah, there's a
At
new
first I
book on
thought
the
it was
Bannekers.
Delbra, but now I know it wasn't. It was you. Okay.
And
I
Kathy
just wanted
Marshall.
to share that. I just wanted to share that. Okay, I'm going to mute myself.
Hold on. I'm about to do my own shout because as I read this, and I said I'm related to Letts. When you count 1, 2, and 2, it says Zachariah Lett, born 1720, was married to Margaret by 1st January 1743 when their daughter Lousanna was born. My grandmother said her mother's name was Emma Marlilla Lucina Lusanna Elizabeth Sasha Lee. I
What?
found Lusanna, but now I see Lousanna. Okay, I'm gonna move on. But that's how
Okay,
come.
also, those people on the Letch, there's a Letch settlement in Ohio.
Oh, like down there where it says Samuel was a Defiance head in Ohio. So somewhere or another, the family broke off and went to Ohio, and she's saying that there's some kind of settlement going
There's a
on.
Letch
In Belmont
settlement.
County,
Right.
Belmont County,
They have a
Ohio,
reunion every
Captina.
year.
It's in Belmont County, Barnesville, and Captina is where the church is and the burial site that you need to go to.
Can you put that in the chat? Whatever we got, let's put it in the chat so that we can maybe click and see. Because now this is about researching and trying to find those connections and bridging them. So see, you hung in here for that breakthrough. There we go. Lewis. Margaret Lewis, servant of Thomas Stockets. What a weird name. Don't discount they were a servant. We don't know the situation. I just throw a name and I just see if it brings anybody back. And if it don't bring anybody back, that's less I got to look at for that day. But the point is that if she had children and they got bound to somebody for 30 years, that mama died. Do that child remember what the law was on their side? And so did they take the name of that enslaver? Or did they take their mother name? So it's better to oversearch than not when it comes to this kind of thing. We can't assume. And that's one reason I thank you guys for hanging in here, because it really is about, I'm hoping that I'm bridging and opening up your eyes to being able to decipher all of this information so you can make it make sense. We're near the end. M through R, Matthews, Pecks, Pearls, Proctors, and Rosses. Matthews, Anne Arundel, head of a Philadelphia County, Pennsylvania household. So if you have Matthew matches, you may have Maryland, you may have Pennsylvania. Charles County, Frederick County. Mary Peel. So now Matthews is somewhere coming up into the name Peel, because in this list, Mary Peel, born 1796, obtained her certificate of freedom. So she is a descendant of Matthews. So now you're going to search Matthews and you're going to search Peel. And then later it says, graciousness, daughter of Catherine Matthews, her daughter Frances Bacon. So now we got Bacon, Peel, Matthews are one family. In Prince George's, Frederick, Charles, and Arundel. 4 counties, 5. So next, Myers, Mayors. Christian Myers, born 1729, Prince George's County, Baltimore County, Baltimore, Frederick County. Eastern Shore of Maryland, wherever that is, Kent County, Talbot County.
Yes.
Mm. So I don't have Myers or Mayors.
Delbert, they actually have a little town here called Myersville, which is just in my backyard. Actually, down the side of the mountain, that's Myersville.
Okay. So if you have Myers and you
Yep.
can even pull back matches to Myers and Frederick, now you know where you can go talk.
Mhm.
Well, that's actually where I learned about the furnace at their society.
Oh. But do the research in the trees. That's why this is amazing to be able to sit in your seat and online do that research in the trees. In every testing platform you have, Ancestry is not the end all be all. I have found a match I never knew I would have found and haven't seen another match other than in my heritage. In one of my lines, a sibling to my oldest ancestor. I found him in my heritage. So you test all your lines with these names that you're writing down. Okay. Peck.
Writing these down.
Peck is a pretty big one. Well, there was a, and you got to remember, I did not put all the information because there was a lot. I kept looking for Frederick and I'm sharing with you about Frederick, but there was a lot of information for a lot of these names. I just wanted to highlight Frederick because that's where Catoctin is coming from, starting from, right? So Prince George's, Frederick is in here, Baltimore City, Washington County, Henny, Polly, David Peck's, white woman having a mulatto child. Pearl. Thought we saw Pearl a little bit before. But when it comes to Pearl, I know it's distorted. Robert Pearl, 1686, was freed in the will of Richard Marsham. Marshall called him Robert a mulatto and stipulated that he should serve until the age of 35, at which time Robert, his wife, and children were to be free. See, that part right there is what pisses me off. When did he get free? Good Googler Moogler. You bound him forever. It's just amazing, these laws that they created and the stipulations that they had. But all the highlights in this document is just showing where pearls were in Frederick. And there was more. Again, I didn't copy everything off of the pages. Sometimes it was a lot. But pearls are definitely in Frederick. I would look at the will for Richard Marshall. Proctor. I found this little image and was like, my goodness, look at these faces. Proctor family, which originated in Charles County, Maryland, descendants of Elizabeth Proctor, who had 2 children by a slave. She was sold for 7 years for each offense, but was renting acres of land from her master when he died. And she left a sizable estate to her children. So I think photos are really cool. I don't know who is in this picture. Oh, actually, and there is the URL. I'll try to copy and paste that at the end. Okay, I see where to find that URL. Glad I found it from somewhere. Ross. Margaret Ross, servant of Anne Lewis, Anne Arundel. Harford County, Washington County, Baltimore County, Frederick County, Queen Anne's County. This family had everybody in almost every county. Annapolis, household of 4.
Thomas Jefferson.
Yes. Oh, yes. Interesting. So, if you have Rosses, now you see where to look for your matches, because that's the same family. Sam, S's. Everything you read?
Oh.
I've already searched, yes.
This is a 2-day project, Deborah.
What'd you say?
This is a 2-day project.
I know. I hit you with something hard, then I bounce. Salmons. Tied to Frederick, other locations, Baltimore City, other locations. But this is really just, I'm just trying to get you guys excited about where these DNA matches that are hidden may be residing and coming from. Because I talked to Kathy earlier, and she was like, I have one free person of color, I think. Kathy, how many have you found so far?
Okay, 1 million. When you look at the numbers that I'm putting in the chat, there's like 120 of this name, 140 of that name. That's based just on Maryland and the surname. And my oldest DNA tester, who was 93 when I got his DNA. So he's the closest to this era. And it's just like, girl. And then there's a lot that have common ancestors that are already there, already common ancestors with what I have in my tree. So yes, thank you very much. And I'm mad at I'm going like crazy here. You guys would laugh. Well, you're probably doing the same thing. And I'm taking a screenshot of this and trying to write this down and then type this in and then yeah. Thank you, Deborah.
You are most welcome, cousin Savoy. Yeah, it's so funny. Like I'll do this research and I sit back and I talk to you guys like, if only you knew. Savoy, Mingle Savoy, Anne Arundel, Frederick. Anne Arundel, Frederick. Sarah married William Barton. Now you have Bartons connected to Savoys. And of course, when the men married a wife, who's her family line, right? So nobody's ever by themselves. So it's about trying to make sense of this madness. What I peeked real quick, he said he bound his daughter Judy to Humphrey Godman for 6 years. So is there some Godmans in here somewhere? She could have got married to a Godman, all we know. And people took that name. So I take this kind of document and I pull those names out and the locations just to see what I get back. Then I look in their trees. If I can't make it make sense, I move on to the next thing until I can make something else make sense. But it's a good way to throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. Scott's. Anne Scott was a servant of Philemon Hemsley in Charles County. She had a child. Mary Scott, alias Flimmer. Why? I don't know. But now we have two names to be looking at. Scott or Flimmer. Flemer. She was to serve John Bruce. Let's see. And I'm just skimming. Charles County, Frederick County. For the name Scott. So when I hear people say common name, yeah, it depends on what time period I'm looking at. It depends on how I'm looking. Everything is going to be common. There are some things very unique. Everything is going to be common. But then again, hold on. Further down, it says, something stuck on me. I saw too many names. Charles Scott enlisted in Captain Henry Gaither's company of 1st Maryland Regiment on May 28, 1778. Was sick in camp at White Plains. Presented in March 1780 in the same list as Joshua Scott, John, and Adam Scott, John Butler, Charles, and Walter Proctor. What? It didn't say he was presented with people. It's saying he took all these names. Interesting. Well, it gives you the Nara rolls. We can try to find if they're still there. But that's interesting. Someone took that many names, especially Proctor and Butler. Adams and Scott. Interesting. Okay. Shorter. Let's wind this up. Shorter in St. Mary's, Frederick, Charles County, Prince County. Let's just say all the heavy hitters. And I'm going to tell you, don't necessarily take the screenshot because I'm going to give you the link to the document. You can print all day. You can look all day because there's going to be so many more names than I'm showing you on that document. This is consider this a teaser. Heavy hitting teaser. Smother, I swear I saw this somewhere before. But she was called a mulatto nanny in Frederick, Anne Arundel, and Baltimore City. All three were her children. Jesus. The separation of these families are amazing. T through Y, these are the names. As you see, I have no two goods because it's black. Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor, not of White Diamond. She was in Prince George's County. Had an illegitimate child by Mr. Thomas Wainwright's Negro George. You have Taylor, Maryland, Prince George's area. I would start with Maryland, search for Wainwright. Look for that man. Look for when he died. And just try to figure and see what those slaves are looking like. And then these were all of her children. Somewhere in Frederick. And it says she was the mother of Sarah Ann Myers. So this might tie the Myers to the Mayers and the Myers that we saw earlier. Thompson. Thompson is a line I have, maternal and paternal, but Frederick is my father's side, Jamaica, UK, but strongly UK. And this is Let at the top. Simon Bourne married Savory Let. So now you have Let's connected to Thompson's. Baltimore City, strongly Frederick. Two Goods. Mary Two Good, Baltimore City. It's sown in William Dellum's house. Mary descendants Eleanor Two Good won her freedom from Dr. Upton Scott in Anne Arundel. She was a granddaughter of a white woman.
What was the
Mary
name before
Fisher.
Two Good? What was the name after Taylor?
Thompson.
I should remember that one. Thanks.
So for Two Good, I saw a name that stood out, that she was the granddaughter of a white woman, Mary Fisher, who was married to a slave in St. Mary's County and had a daughter named Ann Fisher. So we're going to start that tree with Aunt Mary, daughter Ann. Somewhere Mary must have got with a Two Good.
Deborah,
Yes.
I don't know if you recall this, but Crystal's ancestor, Robert Patterson,
Yes.
he was initially going as Robert Two Good Patterson.
Yes.
So
And I
she
think
has
that's
info
him.
on the Two Goods. Yeah,
I
I
think
believe it
that's
is as
him
well.
at 5. That's him at 5.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to point that out.
Yeah, I remember it. So this is her line, but her Two Goods are in Frederick, Anne Arundel. Where else? Baltimore City. So to figure out her connection, she needs to be looking definitely at Fisher's also, though, and Two Goods and Patterson's.
Did I see Scott in there too?
Who?
Scott. Did I see a Scott in there?
No, well, Dr. Upton Scott was who they were enslaved with.
Okay.
When she fought for her freedom, for what I could see. Okay, Watson. Anne Arundel, Frederick, North Milford, Cecil County, Philadelphia County, Pennsylvania. Wedge. White servant woman of St. Bernard's Parish, Patuxent 100, Prince George's County, 1727. What I love to see, my grandmother's name was Violetta. Violetta. It amazes me when I see the name. Yeah, okay, but it still does. Because it's such a unique name.
Mm-hmm.
She was named after a midwife. So Samuel Wedge was in Frederick. And if it's cut off, that's because there's more. information than what I counted. And they weren't in Frederick. So then if you have wedge matches, they're beyond Frederick. Williams, common name, but Guy Williams, a Negro planter, was sued in Anne Arundel for a debt. Then Mark, he was probably the father of Mark, born 1698. There go that name, Impey. Child by Sarah Impey. So now we have Impey and Williams. I don't remember if we saw Williams before, but here is her husband. That's what I love about when I do this kind. I need to know parents, and then I want to see children. And from there, I can bridge a story. It's challenging when they don't give us the names of these people, other people who are in the house who are free. But maybe there's a record somewhere that will tell it, whether it's a tax record in Maryland. I'm being told they have these great tax records. Or maybe there was a different record where we could possibly see the names of these people identified.
What I find interesting is that as I look for my matches, I see certain names that I recognize over and over again.
Very cool. Very cool. And that's when you're starting to pay attention. Wait a minute, this person is tied to all these names.
Right.
And so absolutely. Absolutely.
Unfortunately, my guy took the name Williams for whatever reason before 1834, but he ain't no Williams DNA wise. He's not took that name. And so,
but when you see the names over and over again, then that's where it's helping you to figure out, okay. Then if someone happens to have that first name and that date, it makes it strongly suspicious.
yeah. When he was freed in 1812, he did not have a last name. It was just slave prince. But then he had one when he bought some property in 1834 and chose the name Williams. I like that name.
Oh, there's a story in that name somewhere. Woodward.
Oh, yeah. There's some powerful white men with the name Otho. So he took it to name his son Otho Williams, I guess, so that.
Gotcha.
Whatever.
Gotcha. Woodward, Frederick County. Well, Frederick where? Prince Frederick. Prince Frederick. That's the wrong Frederick. But he was in Anne Arundel, Baltimore town, Montgomery County. This was really a conversation to help you guys realize these families are everywhere. And the immediate families are in so many different counties, but they're the same family. And it's really to help bridge the connections between the separations of these families. Young.
Finding the link between them.
Yeah, definitely. Because sometimes you'll see a name and be like, I don't know what to do with that. I'm looking over here. And you don't know why you need to be looking at all, right? So Young, Kent, Talbot, Frederick, Dorchester, when she obtained her certificate of freedom. Younger had a child named William Bentley. Edward Younger obtained a certificate of freedom. He was married to Polly. So at least we got a wife. Don't have a surname for her. But they had a son named Edward. Perhaps he was identical to Polly Bentley, by whom he had a child named William Bentley. How do you go from Younger to Bentley? I was going to say, I don't have to research this line, but the red is up there. That means I'm connected somehow. You sound like your story, Kathy, where they just took a name.
Yeah. Well, we might have a common answer, Esther, on that though, because I have a Cindy Inez as far as having an account with Younger. And she has two of the ones that you've named, actually. She's got a common ancestor with me. I haven't looked what that is yet, but
Awesome.
Might be on yours.
Awesome. And that's all I got, gang. That's all I got.
All right.
Reflections.
That's a lot. Thank you.
I didn't go too
So
far.
my question is always, when you collect a lot of information, I know you use a lot of spreadsheets, which are great for something like this. So say I've got all these things that are written down on a piece of paper, which is going to be useless really tomorrow. So I need a better way to organize all this information so that I can check, okay, yep, I checked all of these against my tree and all this and then move on? How do you handle all this data since you do about 100 times? And I do a lot of data, but you do a lot more. Where do you put all that information that you, like when you've tested, you've tried something, you've looked, you've examined it something, and you don't want to do it a second time and a third time? Do you have a log of things that you did try and what the results were, or you only write down the successes?
Oh, goodness, no. I have binders, number one. One of the main things I have are binders. In those binders, what I do is I go to a person's profile, me being me. I get an alphabetized separator for my binder, A through Z.
Mhm.
And then I have a binder that is what's my binder? A through I, J through P, R through 11, R through W. I separate. I have 3 major binders, and I go to a person's profile, I print it out, and I print the tree with the extension of how I'm related to them.
Yeah.
And then I put them in the binder with notes. Think I'm related here. And when I'm ready, I go back to that person, I pull it out, and then I'm ready to research that thing.
Okay, so it's not by family, it's by last name, no matter what the family line. It's just by last name and
Well, I write notes on the I write comments on their profile of how I think I'm related to them. And you know, in Ancestry, you can also put notes in there in the on the profile page, you can put a note, right? So I'll stick a note there, and then I'll stick a note there if I haven't added them to my tree. But I will print out every profile. That's me. The profile that I really are strongly with, that's me. Because I might not be ready to look at you. I did all these printing outs last fall. I have 3 binders full, and it's been sitting here until I could organize myself to get prepared to research that thing. So that's the link that I put in the chat. This is the free page that is not Ancestry.
Wait a second, please. Oh.
FreeAfricanAmericans.com.
Okay.
So this is the website that I'm pretty sure I put in the chat. So there is a Virginia link. After 1782, the slaves who were freed. There is North Carolina. This is after emancipation. I don't want that. So, on this one page, Illinois, Texas, and Indiana, they have a lot of information. And I just went to the Maryland and Delaware. There is Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina up there. And I just went to Delaware. I went to each one, and this is what you saw on every PowerPoint. And that's why I say it could be so much more than what I put in that screen. That is one family. This is just Adams. G's to the Louises. This is just Adams, and I couldn't fit all of that on one. So I just scraped a little bit, right? So, but if you're related to Adams, now you can go here and now you can read, organize, put it together.
Great. Yeah, that guy did so much work. He's incredible. I got to meet him at Oggs once, and
Awesome. So somebody need to reach out to him because he definitely. It's amazing that we get to, really, we got to sit back working on this, but somebody was working on something for our good, for our benefit, and it's just amazing. But I kid you not, there is no possible way that I can try to search a match and figure out how I'm going to get back here to an enslaver if I haven't built this part right here. If you don't have your tree extended far back, you won't know how to make it make sense when you find the connection. Oh, organization. So I have all of these. I don't know if you guys are aware, but you can save a web link to a folder in your browser. You guys know what these icons mean, right? They're the DNA matches I found. I've put them in my tree. And what that does is, there you go. Thank you for that, cousin. It's Talise. I said Latrice. It's Talise.
You're welcome.
I've added Shell to my tree. So this is Shell's tree. And so what happened with Shell's tree, my DNA match right here said 3rd cousin, 1 time removed, or 4th cousin. So a 4th cousin is 6 generations in. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Somewhere in a flyout is where her and I have the same ancestor. Guys, when you're counting fourth cousin, one fourth cousin, yourself, your parent. At your grandparent level is first cousin, second cousin, third cousin. The flyout is your fourth cousin. Match. Somebody over here is where I match you.
Mhm.
So I went down her tree and I'm like, nope. Yeah, maybe. Strong
Where's your grub?
possibilities. Hmm?
Where's your grub? Where are those grubs from? Are they from Virginia? Are they in Virginia?
Yes,
What?
they are.
What? Okay, wait. Okay, wait. You have to do something with that. My guy is on, one of those where the white folks after the Civil War, they wanted to get their land back and they had to sign an oath or something,
Mhm.
and they had to get witnesses. Well, that name, near Wythe, but closer to Manassas area,
Mhm.
signed one of those oaths. And my guy that I'm working on, Albert Roy, also was on the signing line. So I was looking
Okay.
at grubs, and I do have DNA matches to grubs. So I kind of
Talk
wondered
to
if
Shell. And what,
not.
what I'm gonna tell you right now, what's amazing, if she doesn't come back for you, that's because you're over here with low matches
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day. So that's where Jed match comes into play. You're
Mm-hmm.
over here with low matches. Okay. So I don't have a grub. Johnson is a possibility. Virginia, North Carolina. I'm like, okay, I put a cap in that. Harvey. I started seeing Brodus. I started seeing Pryor. Maybe it was new to me until I had a whole nother cousin that had a lot of Broduses. And so I'm going down the line, going down the line. I'm gonna go to this. I'm gonna go to Taliaferro Parker. I was like, interesting. I ended up having a cousin that is related to me through Polly Fortune, Jerusha Fortune. The fortune is running to my birds. So that's one match to Shell.
Mm-hmm.
But when I went to Mary here, she had this Mary lined up. And I saw Fortune. I said, okay. But when I went to my tree, this Mary person had nothing. I had no clue where she came from. All I had was Mary, nothing else. And when I counted 4 and I saw Shell had Mary, I had nothing. I said, my God, this is where I connect to her. And then I started seeing fortune matches.
Mm-hmm.
So then it
Yeah.
made sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if I was way over here, I never would have made that connection. Absolutely never. So this is one reason why I say you have to take your time, work your line until you get it as far back as you can get. Then you go to the next line. And then the next line. I would never try to jump to 1700 nothing until I had all of this and I was confident of what I saw.
Yeah.
But then after I do this, I'm grateful that this was beneficial for you.
Yes. Let me save this. There we go.
Emily, why did you say this is a 2-day? So that we can all do this together?
No, I need to look for some of those things first, then come back to it. I was,
Very true. Very true. Very
Well, in
true.
celebration of Delbra, I'm going to be munching on one of my my little addiction here. Chocolate addiction.
So in honor of my grandma B-Day, Miss Biot, I thank you guys for coming and hanging out here with me tonight. And it's absolutely my prayer is benefits you. And I will see you on the flip side when I come up with another reason to have a session.
So much. Appreciate it. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Love you, Delbra.
Thank you, cousins. Peace
All right,
out.
thank you. Good
You're
night.
welcome. Good
Night.
night.